Thank you. Good morning. How many of you are very familiar with TVAAS, the value-added system? Yeah, most of you probably are. It's been around in Tennessee for over 20 years, and it's so ingrained in everything we do, you cannot have a conversation in Tennessee about education without talking about TVAAS, value-added, or growth. You can't talk about accountability without talking about value-added. You can't talk about teacher evaluations without talking about value-added. You can't talk about tenure without talking about value-added. And so I'm going to give you the perspective today of a practitioner. Do we have any practitioners in here who currently work for public education that use TVAAS on a regular basis? Shannon? Yeah. Right. Let me tell you what, at its basis, get this on, what TVAAS is and why it was born. It was born to measure the impact schools and teachers have on academic progress. It is not achievement. It does not measure how well students are doing on a standardized test. It measures the growth of students on standardized tests. And even more specifically, the relationship between TVAAS is that it tries to measure the effect of teachers on students. So TVAAS measures student growth, not whether the student is proficient on the state assessment. And so there's a difference, and we have to understand this, because even when I talk with my teachers about value-added, sometimes they have a misconception and they get value-added and achievement confused. And they talk about TVAAS, and they're really talking about achievement, and I'm talking about growth, and they're talking about below basic, or proficient, or advanced, or whatever. So there's some key differences between what achievement is and what growth is. For instance, achievement measures a student's performance on a single point in time, a year-end summative assessment. That's what achievement is. Value-added measures a student's progress across time. It's not a single point measurement. It's a growth period. When you talk about achievement, you always have to bring back, especially with our TCAP test and our new TN Ready test, you always have to talk about student demographics. In fact, anytime you talk about achievement, you talk about subgroups. You talk about economically disadvantaged, and you talk about our minority students and our special education population and our Hispanic population and so on. And you take that into consideration when we talk about achievement. It is not taken into consideration when we talk about TVAAS. It's not related to the student demographics at all. In achievement on our standardized tests, whether it be end-of-course tests, whether it be TN Ready, whether it be TCAP, whether it be the ACT, students are measured against a standard. In TVAAS, students are compared to their own progress. They're measured against themselves over a period of time. So we have growth, and we have achievement. So to put this in perspective on what it really looks like, let's look at this. This is achievement. And we have, we'll just say this is a 5th grade math class, 5th grade math. And at the end of the year, this is what we know about that 5th grade math class. You see where we are at proficient. The class average is above proficient at the end of the year. So what general things can you diagnose about that class? Hell, they're pretty damn good, wouldn't you say? The class average is above proficiency. They do really well. Absolutely, you could say, boy, that's a high-achieving class. You could say, God, there's probably not many special education students in that class. Probably say the demographics, there's probably not a lot of free and reduced lunch kids in that class. Probably don't have any ESL kids in that class. Generally, you could say that, and that would be probably a pretty good guess. So let's look at the next class. Student group B, the class average is below proficient, the whole class. So if you're an administrator in Tennessee schools, and this is the information you have to go on, and you want to evaluate a teacher's effect on a group of students, what would be your general thought? That teacher's doing really well. This teacher needs to pick it up a little bit. Right? If that's what you know, and that's what state assessment gives us. What are state assessments? They're like the obituary. You know, it's what happened in the past. We're reading about it now. That's achievement. Now, if we want to talk about growth, let's see what these students were like at the beginning of the year. Let's look at student group A. At the beginning of the year, they were there. Does that change your perspective on this class? Or let's look at student group B. Beginning of the year, they were there. Now evaluate the teacher. This is what TVAAS measures. The growth over time between students at the beginning of the year, or any point in time, beginning of the year, and the end of the year, and what happened to them. The argument that TVAAS makes is that those arrows in the middle is called teacher effect. Whether that's right or wrong, it's teacher effect. Now, how do they do this? Well, they do it through research-based statistical modeling. In Tennessee, through TCAP, and what will become this year TN Ready, the new assessment that is more Common Core aligned, more what the standards that we're teaching, they use what's called a multivariate response model, an MRM. And it's used for tests given in consecutive grades like TCAP, TN Ready, our reading assessments, our science assessments, and so on, grades 3 through 8. Those are courses that are given in consecutive years. Now, if you really want to get into TVAAS and you really want to look at this, this is the mathematical formula. However, when you put in the different variables, and you put in a variable like missed assignments, or a student who's transferred from another school, or you put in the variable of poor test performance. The student was here, and then all of a sudden they have what's called an outlier, and they test down there, and that's a variable. So if you really want to know what that formula looks like, it's that. Now, I've got nothing on this. I can't talk about it. But that's what it looks like. For high school, end-of-course tests, and those are courses like biology, and chemistry, and EOCs. Those are not consecutive courses given like you would in 3 through 8. They use what's called a univariate response model, and it's given for multiple grades such as our EOCs. And that formula looks like that, just in case you're keeping notes at home. And if you add in the variables, it looks like that. So once again, I've got nothing on this. If you want to, any math majors in here? Help me explain this. I've got nothing, and it's really not important, just to know that that is the model that they use. Now, a couple of things you have to know. The growth expectation for students in a year. The way TVAAS works is it sets a growth expectation about what students, or let me rephrase it, how much students should learn in a one-year time period. And that's the growth expectation. How much should students learn in a one-year time period? And the model that I get in my mind all the time is that of a track. Yep, a track. And you have a starting line on your track. If all the students were equal when they came to you, they'd start at the starting line, they'd complete a lap, and that would be 1 year, and you'd be done. We all know students don't start at the same starting level, do they? You get students that are, 2 grade levels behind, or a half a year behind, or don't know how to read, and then we get some students that are way up on the other side. TVAAS measures one lap, 1 year's worth of growth, no matter where they start at. So the simple definition of growth is current achievement, current results compared to all prior achievement and prior results. When it's measured by a quality assessment. The assessment has to have certain things. Typically, if you look on this on a chart, the expected growth is set at 0. So if you look at a TVAAS chart that I'll show you in a minute, it'll have 0. And if a student gained 1 year's worth of knowledge, it's 0. And anything above that, we call that growth. And anything below that 0, that's not growth. That's negative gains. So when we take the TCAP, say this is grades 3 through 8, and we take the TCAP test, the TCAP has a number of correct. And the TCAP will then send us scale scores, right? Scale scores. And then we'll convert those scale scores to what's called NCEs. Anybody know what an NCE is? Normal curve equivalence. So the bell curve with NCE looks a lot like this. So here's your normal distribution. Here is your NCEs. TVAAS does not use percentiles. Why not? The bell curve, and you can't really average percentiles, can you? No, and the space between the points of reference are not equal in percentiles when you put it on a bell curve. So TVAAS uses normal curve equivalence. So an example would be how this would work. Kind of a simplified example is you look at the students in grade 8. And this is their results in grade 8. These are their scale scores, and this is where they're converted to NCEs. Okay? So you have 5 students in this class. This is their NCEs. You average those, and their mean baseline is 25.2. You take the same group of students the following year in 9th grade. And you look, these are their scale scores. These are their NCEs. This is their averaged or mean observed NCE when you average them. So you got 25.2 to 35.2. Growth equals mean observed minus mean baseline. So 35.2 minus 25.2 is a 10. So a crude measurement of how this works, this group of students grew 10 NCEs. So when you look at it, on a TVAAS report, it looks like this. So this is a report every educator in Tennessee gets. And I think this is a 5th grade. Okay, this is, look up here, this is grade 4, 5, 6, 7th, and 8th from one school. So we don't start TVAAS in grade 3. We start achievement tests in grade 3. Why don't we do growth in grade 3? Well, it's a 3-year average, but we don't have any prior knowledge in the 2nd grade. We don't have any growth scores in the 2nd grade, so we can't tell how far they grew from 2nd to 3rd grade. But we do have in 3rd grade achievement scores, so we can pick up TVAAS in 4th grade. And so here you go. The 2015 growth measures, they grew 0.3, 0.3. So what's 1 year's worth of growth? 0. What this group get? They got 0.3. How do we figure that? You take their NCEs from the same group of students. You look down here in 2014, this group of students got a 49.1, an average 49.1 NCE. What'd they do? 2015. You go over here. They're in the 4th grade now. They got a 49.4. Take 49.4, subtract 49.1, you get that growth standard. So if you wanted to see what they did in the 5th grade, you take 5th grade score minus, or 4th grade score minus 5th grade score, and that's where you get a negative score. Now, if you're doing the math, 47.5, 50.6, you subtract it. That's not 3.2. And that's kind of why TVAAS drives you crazy, because they talk about the standard deviation and so on, and the subtraction just doesn't always work. It's usually very, very close, but sometimes it doesn't always add up. But it puts you in the ballpark to know that in this certain school, your fifth grade kind of struggled, didn't they? Sixth grade did well. Seventh grade did pretty well, pretty good as well, 3.2. Eighth grade kind of was a push. You take the standard error, I should say, and even though they grew a little bit, it's probably just kind of a wash. That's what TVAAS reports looks at. That's what it is. To show the students' growth, a group of students' growth over a selected period of time. No. But they're not measuring, TVAAS doesn't measure individual students per se. It measures groups of students. And so when we talk about high school, we talk about EOCs, it's a regression-based model because once again, high school, in EOCs, they don't use NCEs. They just go with percentiles. And it's a regression-based model where they actually use 3 years past test history to make a projected growth. And then they compare the projected growth to the predicted growth.
The high school, how do they account for different courses? Like in history, it's not like reading.
Right.
And even math is different. So
That's the best question. SAS, who runs TVAAS, will tell you it's in their model, and they take all their English language arts scores, they take all their past math scores, they take an average of the average growth of students in the state of Tennessee. And all that goes into a formula to get a projection of what a group of students should get. So they would just say it's done with past performance of a group. And so this is what a high school EOC report looks like. This is an Algebra 2 class. Looked at 2015, tested 111 students. The average score, scale score, was 750. That's in the 63rd percentile, or that's 63%. The average predicted score was 741. You usually take 750, subtract 741, that'll give you your growth standard. So this group actually did really, really well. In fact, you look over a 3-year time period, I don't know if we've seen this very much, but that's a pretty good growth score, 18. Good Lord, that's excellent. 18 and 8 and 8. So over a 3-year average, this teacher's got an 11.5 growth score, which is, he's an all-star, or she's an all-star. A little bit about the history of how TVAAS came about. It's a brainchild of Dr. William Sanders and Dr. Robert McLean from the University of Tennessee. At UT, Sanders' primary job was running a statistical and computing service unit that primarily served the UT Department of Agriculture. And Sanders designed this formula based upon an article he read that said, there is no empirical way that you can use student data to evaluate teachers. And Sanders said, I think you can. I think you can. So we went back and looked at the longitudinal mixed model methodology put together by a guy named C.R. Henderson, who's in the National Science Hall of Fame from the University of Illinois, from the University of Iowa. And he did great work back in the 20s and the 30s on livestock production. And he used his longitudinal study to project how much milk this herd was going to get. And that's the basis of where TVAAS came from. I shouldn't say TVAAS. That's the basis on which the formula, the methodology came about. How much milk can we get from a herd of cattle? And let's project that. TVAAS was adopted, or value added was adopted. Tennessee Code Annotated 491606, part of the Educational Improvement Act of 1992. which provides the legislative authority for assessing the annual calculation of teacher effect. So this is not just a Tennessee Department of Education thing. What is it? State law.
Side note on that, historically, was that I accompanied Dr. Sanders down to for the attorneys that write the bills out, and the attorney started writing, the language of the bill, and Dr. Sanders leaned over and said, "You need to stop. You need to copy exactly what I say." And he quoted what you see in statute. He quoted that from him.
Yeah.
Exactly the way that.
Did you know him, Dr. Sanders?
Unfortunately, I was designated to read the statistical model and make sure that it was sound.
Okay.
After I got to page 32 of the 200-page document, I was lost. Okay, I knew no more stats on that.
Well, you and David have something in common then, because Dr. Sanders, when he first came about with his model, the first group that he studied was Knox County. Got numbers from there. Then he went to Blount County, Tennessee, and had a graduate assistant named David Cook helping him with that. Is that correct? Then he went to Chattanooga City, which is now part of Hamilton County, and did a third study and worked with the Department of Education for several years, and they rejected him over and over again before finally in 1992 it became part of state law. What it said back in 1992 still holds water, is that a student must be present 150 days to get TVAAS accountability, or 75 in a student schedule. Yes. They mandated that it's in grades 3 through 8, ELA, math, science, and social studies. High school at that time was to be determined by State Board of Education. What it is now is Algebra 1, Algebra 2, English 2, English 3, not social studies, U.S. history, biology, biology 2, and chemistry. Is that right? Yeah. At that time, TVAAS was not to be part of the public record. And estimates on how students were doing, how graduate students were doing who just left teacher preparation programs, went out into the teaching world. The teacher preparation program was supposed to get results on how well their graduates did their first couple years in the classroom, their teacher effect. I think that happened. I think teacher preparation programs got the numbers. I can't say with fidelity what they did with them. They got them, and they still do it today. Absolutely. From 1993 to 2010, principals and teachers received TVAAS reports, but they were only informal. And I know back when I was teaching and an early administrator, most of the TVAAS reports went to like the guidance counselors. And then the guidance counselors are the keeper of data. And they would sit down with teachers sometimes, and they'd sit down with principals and kind of explain what happened in their school. But there was no standardized way to discuss them. They just got a number. There was no accountability. It didn't matter. It was just information that we think your school needs to know, and these are your growth measurements. These are your TVAAS scores. No accountability on anything. But that changed dramatically in 2010, 2011 with the First to the Top. Race to the Top, which would be the First to the Top Act in Tennessee, which TVAAS was incorporated into Tennessee's teacher evaluation system. It required that 35% of a teacher's summative evaluation come from TVAAS scores, and that teacher evaluation scores were tied to the new tenure law, which meant that during a 5-year probationary period, the last 2 years of any teacher wanting tenure, their TVAAS scores, their teacher effect scores, had to be a 4 or a 5 in those last 2 years. The new federal government, I've gotten some briefings on it. I have not sat down and read an evaluation of it. Yes. Yes. Now, what are some of the inherent issues with this? Think about it. Howard?
I know you're measuring the student
Absolutely.
And a teacher's competence could be determined by something beyond their control. That's part of the
Probably the number one criticism of TVAAS is, yeah. What happened if it comes to the TCAP test in May and a student's parents have a big fight and he stays up all night and has to go and test the next day? Now, if you read TVAAS and SAS, they say in their formula, they have a way to counter that.
All filtered out.
It's filtered out. Yeah, they're called outliers, and it's filtered out on variables.
Because you're dealing with groups instead of.
You're right. You're dealing with groups of students instead of individual students. Good. All right, but let's think this way. So I'm a teacher, and I teach. I'm an art teacher. I'm an art teacher. But 35% of my score on my evaluation, my summative evaluation at the end of the year, 35% of my score is going to come from TVAAS scores. I don't give a TVAAS test. I'm an art teacher. Where's my scores going to come from? Where's it going to come from? It's going to come from everybody else. It's going to come from, you can choose to take school-wide composites, math composite, or English language arts composite, or a school-wide composite. Better yet, I teach at an elementary school. My elementary school classification is we are K through 2. And nobody in the building takes a test. We don't even take the test at our building. Where do I get my TVAAS scores from? You get it from the next school up. You get your TVAAS scores from. I'm a guidance counselor. I don't give a test.
I guess it's not been a problem because no one's
Oh, it is a
had
problem.
a teacher
All right.
sued yet.
Let me get through this and we'll talk about that,
I'm
okay?
just curious.
And once again, it's tied to the new tenure law. 2013 teacher and principal evaluation policy, they applied TVAAS to principal evaluations now. Principals now receive 35% of their summative evaluation based upon their school's composite TVAAS scores. For this upcoming year, actually for this year I should say, or let me say, this was last year. Teachers given the opportunity of having TVAAS account for an additional 15% of their summative evaluation if they scored 3, 4, or 5 on teacher effects. So then going up to 35%, they can choose to have it be half of their evaluation if they're good. The State Board of Education, you guys probably remember this, the State Board of Education tied TVAAS scores to teacher licensing a couple years back. Dr. Brewer, you remember the language of that? Yes, I'm afraid so. I remember it too. Yeah. Which basically said, over a 2-year time period, if you had a 1 or a 2, there was a possibility that you could not just lose your job, you'd lose your license in the state of Tennessee.
If you lose your license, you lost your job.
Exactly. Yeah. The state legislature stepped in later that spring and changed that law, or changed what the State Board of Education did, basically put in the law that TVAAS scores will not relate in any way to teacher licensing. It's changed again this year, the Act of 2015. Because of, we're making a huge foundational shift in Tennessee from TCAP to TN Ready, from a paper test to an all-online digital test. And so the legislature said, well, let's minimize that at least this first year, that in 2015-16, this year, this spring, gross scores can either be 25% from your past 2 years averaged together, or just 10% for this year. And then 2016 and beyond, it'll just measure 15% down from 35%. Now, you say, well, this is kind of a really funny system. It's got to be innate to just Tennessee. It's only Tennessee people who do it. but it's really spreading. As of 2014, Ohio, Pennsylvania, North Carolina Departments of Education have adopted it as their accountability model. New Hampshire and Iowa are currently piloting it in their state boards of education. And what's even more interesting is individual districts in 15 other states. The state allows that district to use TVAAS or EVAAS, Educator Value Added Assessment System, as part of their reporting mandate. So even though it has some issues, other states have started adopting it as part of their evaluation model.
And obviously, Georgia's developing their own statistical formulas to do the same thing. So imagine there's some other, I mean, basically,
Sure.
they're using demographics where y'all have left that out. So, interesting.
Yeah. Okay. Now I can tell you from a practitioner standpoint. Those are the facts, and from a practitioner standpoint, I kind of like TVAAS myself. I think it's overreached. The tentacles have went out too far. But as a single data point in evaluating teachers, as a single data point, not the data point, as a single to add on to multiple other points, I like it. If I could just say, you know what, that 35% and 15% doesn't really interest me. I mean, it really doesn't. What I am interested about is to see the teacher effect score, because I can say in my own school system, and I can probably say with a certainty of about 90%, it lines up pretty well. About 90%. I don't need a TVAAS score to tell me when a teacher is doing a really poor job, nor do I need a TVAAS score to tell me when a teacher is doing a really good job. And there's some cases in which I look at a TVAAS score and it's a 1, and I look at the teacher, and the teacher's an all-star. For some reason, they got a 1 or a 2. Down from, they look at their statistical pass, 5, 5, 5, 2. What the heck, did you forget how to teach this year? And that's, when you say a different group of students, you would think, well, if I got a low group of students, this is not about achievement. If I got a low group of students, what does that give me an opportunity to do? Grow them. High-performing group.
Consistently high performing, where do I go?
Yeah.
We're already at the top. I mean, statistically, at the very best, you could have no change. At the very best.
Yeah. Now, TVAAS wouldn't say that. SAS says no matter where the students are at, you can grow them higher.
But it's only as good as the test. And you're using the whole basis is a test measures that. And so it doesn't measure that, the whole system.
Yeah, if you got a sorry test, you're right. You're screwed in a number of ways. Oh, yeah. Has anybody seen what students experience when they get on a computer to take the new TN Ready tests? Have you seen that? It is quite daunting, actually, for students to get in there and when they do the math test to be able to pull lines down and so on, and they have to highlight things out of a test. And, it's so much different than a multiple choice test.
You and I can have a long discussion. I was impressed with when you guys started.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't like it then, I don't like it now. So you like it and I don't.
Right.
So we can have a lot of discussion.
Well,
Part of the issue is when I ask Dr. Sanders, of course, he never answers anything without 5 pages or something. He has no short answers. But this statistical model that he used is really an and stack them up
Yeah.
as they go through, eighth grade. Then I'll have growth. And then the answer I got again was another 5-page dissertation.
Yeah.
An answer. But I am not a TVAS fan. I like NCEs.
Mhm.
And what I don't like about TVAS is it's measuring groups rather than individuals. I prefer using NCEs, and I can see a growth of each child, each child, each child.
Which you can anyway, just
Yes.
taking the TVAS information. You can anyway.
And if you're talking growth,
Right.
we're doing this predictor model.
Right.
And, pre-test, post-test is a great predictor. You want to see how much growth. And that would be a thing too. And when you ask about running data, he will run it for you, but you can't run it yourself.
Right. And you still can. And I would say, when I say I like TVAS, I do. I don't care about if it's involved in the evaluation system or not. That really doesn't interest me. What interests me, I absolutely. What interests me is that it is another point of data when we talk about the effectiveness of a teacher. For the most part, I think TVAS is a pretty good mirror, especially now. I wouldn't do anything based upon a one-year average, a one-year score. Don't do anything with that. But over a 3-year time period in which you see consistent growth among a teacher, I think that's a pretty good reference. You have 3 years of negative growth, I think that's a pretty good reference. Okay. Yeah, I know.
Showing that it is not a valid model, that it is, they're saying it shouldn't be used wasting your opinion about what the best thing about it is. It's like probably 9 years worth of
Right.
stuff.
Now, what I can tell you is in the research put this together, you can go and probably find 5 education or 5 mathematical institutions, statistical institutions, that will tell you that TVAS is a good model. But once again, do I think it does a pretty good job representing the growth of teachers? I think it does. Now, do I think we should measure a teacher's worth as far as having a job, licensing, tenure, those tentacles where it's reached out? I don't. Do I think it's a good, valid reference point for a principal? I do.
So you would use the scenario you gave where you have to do review with the teacher. 1 year they come up with lousy growth scores. You're looking for a 3 or 4 year pattern.
Absolutely. Absolutely. If I had a teacher that came and she had a -5, was torn to pieces, I would sit down, pull up my chair next to that teacher, and I said, let's talk about it. What do you think happened here? And let's see if she could explain it. And sometimes they can't, sometimes they can. And she said, well, I was sick for 2 months, and I didn't really, I didn't cover this, and I didn't cover the standards that were going to be tested. Well, if that's the case, that's why they got it.
This situation that's going on in New York State, a very good master teacher for 26 years,
Right.
with almost identical from 1 year to the next student achievement score.
Right.
Had her score, I don't know, I forgot the number, it's like went from 14 to 2 or something like that on this model. Well, her husband's an attorney, and they decided it does have implications for her licensing and everything else there.
Right.
So the Supreme Court of the state of New York has decided to review because they couldn't get the judge to understand. So,
And once again, if you ask my opinion on whether I think we should involve TVAS in tenure, in a job action against a teacher and so on, I'm not.
is it in Tennessee?
Yes. Now,
The district has a choice if they follow up on it.
yes.
So the district still has a choice if they want to pursue that and dismiss that teacher or.
However, but once again, as another point of data on all the data you get pointing to how teachers are doing, I like it.
Yeah, I could see
Yeah.
using it like you're talking about, but it seems a little obscure though to make a decision over a teacher's appointment to me. I mean, to say, well, the statistics will give a
Yeah.
5-minute response. That's a moral decision.
Oh, absolutely. Now, I will tell you, Howard, and Keith, you're probably the same way. If I wanted to dismiss a teacher and all I had in my gun was TVAAS scores, I would never do it. Now, if I had this piece of evidence, this piece of evidence, this piece of evidence, and 3 years of documented low TVAAS scores, I'd bring them with me.
Well, I hope all teachers think like you.
Well, I think they do.
I think they do
You
too.
don't want to go into court.
Yeah. Ever.
Yeah, with just this.
Yeah.
You're going to look at all of that.
I wish it were like that too, and maybe princess and superintendents that are not like that. Because the term that I use drives me crazy is when princess and superintendents use the term data driven. That is fallacious because data should be informed. My teachers should be data informed, not data driven.
Yeah, and I always say I use data to find problems. Data's never solved one of them. People solve them.
So are superintendents' evaluations based on this evaluation? It stops with the principal? Are there plans to do this for superintendents?
I don't think so. No, we're evaluated by the Board of Education on whatever scale they want to evaluate us on.
It's interesting, they've stopped it there
Yeah.
at the principal, at the building level,
Yeah.
not the district. The board could do that.
Absolutely. Good day.
They could. What you've got is a different contractual
Right,
relationship
right.
between superintendent and the school board,
Right,
than what the principals and the teachers.
right. David,
I have a phone call this school year. Asking the question was, what do you do with a group of teachers that have been the same group of teachers for 3 to 5 years? There are one teacher. And as a superintendent, or put yourself in the place of a friend as a what do you do? You tried this, you tried that, you done
Wow.
this, you done that. And I think that's why we're at the place where we're at now.
right,
Because in education, those people have stayed for 30 years.
right.
You know,
David, how'd you answer him?
I talked about what they were doing,
Yeah,
what their, if they had academic coaching,
yeah,
if they had any requirements like I said, first of all, you have to have a written program. Have what you're going to do with teachers that have 3 to 5 years. One might be to go to
First thing I would do is go down and make sure those teachers are teaching the standards. Because if you're doing all that and you just can't get above a 1, something's wrong with your students. There was something wrong with the approach you're taking with your students. Are you teaching what's being assessed?
Is there any, has there been any study on if teachers in Tennessee could actually move from a lower, the percentage or, do teachers tend to score the same number
Yeah.
every time?
Say that again. Say that again.
Do teachers tend to, over a period of time, get the same TVAAS score? Like 1s are always pretty much 1s, 2s are pretty much always 2s, 5s are always pretty much 5s. Is there any change?
Variation.
There's a lot of variation, actually, believe it or not. There's a lot of variation.
So,
Yeah.
and the
Yeah.
answer would be that I think the teacher advancement program,
Right.
the TAP model, has done studies, that show that they do progress.
Yeah.
Now, if they don't progress, if you've got one that's consistent, they're probably going to do other things besides on the data that
Right.
makes them a poor teacher.
Let me ask this, what if there's another variable, what if they're having the same evaluator each time? Evaluators know what to do.
One of the other problems Tennessee had, and they've done some work on, is the teachers that come in with the one value added, and yet the principal has given them 4s and 5s.
Right.
So the state will come down on them.
Yeah.
Right. They come in and say, what's going on?
Yeah.
Yeah.
In fact, the state gives us a report every year that says, all right, based on your evaluations say you have 75% of your students or teachers that are 4 and 5s, based on your evaluations. However, if you look at the same teachers and you look at their TVAAS scores, they're 2s and 3s. Now, it's been like that for 3 years. Don't you think we have a little problem here?
They're assuming TVAAS is always correct. Whoever's doing the evaluation.
However, they also give you a report if it's the other way, too. Look, you've got teachers that are getting 4 and 5s for 3 years, and your average is you're giving them 2s. They're doing something right.
Private companies developing now in Tennessee that a school system can hire to come in and do what I would call a reliability check on the evaluation.
Right.
Like if Brian had a teacher that they were getting 4s and 5s for 3 or 4 years, and they were 1, they could hire this private company to come in and do the evaluation.
Yeah.
That's correct. And what we've asked, when I was practicing superintendent, what we asked for as superintendents is that the core office would come in and they would do the audit
Mhm.
school districts if they had a high number of 3s and 4s, 4s and 5s that their evaluators did. And the scores were
Right.
reverse of that.
Yeah. Keith East Court does that for us every year.
Well, the core district that we were in, they did the same thing.
Yeah.
We had a guy that came out and did the audit, and it worked very, very well for us. And then you take your evaluators, from what they come up with, you take your evaluators back through the process again, and see that they get something they miss, so you take them back through that again. And then periodically through the year, I would go down and I would look at what our principals, I look at their evaluation, I sit in on the classes,
Mhm.
and see how they were doing as far as evaluating. Then we would come back and we would see the scores that I gave and the scores that evaluated.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we looked at
Yeah.
interrater reliability.
And Keith, every year, at the end of the year, we get teacher effect scores, line up in a spreadsheet. And I can go through that whole list, and probably 85% of them line up exactly where I thought they'd be. And then I said, God, how'd you get a 2 this year? Or, well, look at here. She was a 2 last year. She's a 5 this year. High five me, But for the most part, it lines up where I think it's going to line.
Instead of
David, I think that, honestly, I think that's all in your leadership, wouldn't you say? I don't make a big deal out of TVAAS scores unless they're consistently really bad. I make a big deal out of it when they do really well on them. But because me and my principals have kind of the same philosophy about where we're moving with this, we put our coaches in. Yeah, we put in our coaches in there, and once again, I really have my principals go down and make sure the teacher's teaching the right stuff. Because more than likely, that's where I found where when teachers are getting really poor test performance, both in achievement and in growth, and you can bring in achievement into this discussion now, it's more than likely they're not teaching what's being assessed.
I think there's a big connection, I think there's a big between just what a person's work ethic is
Yeah.
and their value add. Because we still have despite standards that are, last year having gone to so many schools for practicing students, we still have schools that I call, they're still back in the league grade. They're not concerned about that, they don't, you know, it may lay things. But we still have teachers that are teaching from the textbook, and they don't even look at the things,
Yeah, absolutely.
you know, and that's work ethic.
Let me tell you a story about, I'll end with this, about past director I worked for, Rob Britt. We were down at a middle school one time, and we were in the hall, and I was his assistant director, he's director, and we were down looking at this school. And here comes this English teacher bopping up the hall, and he's about 27 years old, and he's got a t-shirt on and shorts and flip-flops. And he's walking down the hall, he walks by, we talk to him, and I said, Rob, don't you think that's a little unprofessional? Don't you think we need a dress code and so on? And Rob says, let's see what his teacher effect is first. We may not want to mess with his feng shui right now. And sure enough, he was a pretty good teacher. He was a 4 and 5 teacher consistently, which means he's doing what we want him to do despite flip-flops.
One of the things you talked about is we have teachers that are scoring consistently low, and you talked about on the way to do this. What I found in my system, my school was sometimes they're just in the wrong place. And that second grade teacher who's not scoring well might be like, yeah, it's a fifth grade teacher,
Yeah.
and they're just in the wrong place.
Yeah.
And I think the principal needs to recognize talent, ability, potential for a teacher in our evaluation of this is the right assignment.
I would agree. And once again, when I talk multiple data points, that's one of them. And culture and how they fit in the environment is key.
And I think he's emphasizing a good point.
I do too.
It's that collaboration between that principal and that teacher that you make an improvement, you know, that relationship that can improve them from a 1 to a 2.
Well,
And you won't see some
yeah.
problems. That's right.
Right, I am just learning that discussion. I miss what you said about the students that move from the present principal to the student. You should have got well to it, or did not got well to it?
I don't know. But I will tell you, we've just done, because right now, in fact, today we're giving EOCs for block schedule in high schools. So our high school kids are testing on the new 10 ready courses right now. From what my understanding is on how we've done, our teachers say we've done pretty well. Now, when they say pretty well, that means we didn't have many computer problems, the state network was good, we connected really good, and the students didn't really struggle and ask a lot of questions like, I just don't know how to do this. Now, whether we scored good or not, I have no idea and won't know until the spring.
I will tell you, in Georgia, they collected that data for kids who take tests, computer versus paper. They get some of it found very little. I would expect them not to be learning so much.
Yeah.
Yeah, that,
So,
I'm just saying.
Fran, all I can tell you is so far so good as far as the testing environment has been really good. Now, how we scored, I don't know yet. We'll just have to wait and see. Now that's high school. It'll be a different story when we get our third grade and fourth grade and fifth grade on computers. So we'll see.
See, I'm almost think that what we were doing in our systems that I left is that we got keyboarding even down into the kindergarten,
So
the first and second grade, so that the third grade,
yeah.
that they would be achieving.
Yeah, Keith, we did the same thing, and that was something we recognized about 3 years ago, is keyboarding skills, because the new test is a little bit more than point and click.
When we start comparing systems in schools, we're not comparing. And we also, one of the things, there are some practices that are occurring, for example, moving the 4 teachers down to first and second. And I know one high school that the students that had come from the 8th grade and had passed algebra for credit, when they got to the 9th grade, the high school did a song and dance with those students and parents that got them to take algebra 1 again to boost their scores up. So when you're comparing schools and school systems, keep in mind, one school may have scored pretty high, but did some unethical things to get it there. Am I wrong, Brian?
You're not.
I think this goes back to the importance of leadership. And you have those like, if I were to systems and had the attitude about using these tools that Brian had, I would be comfortable. But having held a teacher in a system where somebody purposes, oh, you have 2 years and no one's your fired, you're out of here, that's not an attitude of trying to help somebody improve. That's an attitude of trying to find somebody else.
David, do you have time for me to show them one more thing, real quick? You have time? This is kind of cool. That I can show them one more thing?
Yes.
Yeah. I got to go back to and work hard for the kids out of Alcoa City Schools. All right, this is a scatter plot, and this will show you just a little bit, it'll demonstrate it just a little bit more. So let's just take the 7th grade, 2015, and this is 7th grade math. And we're going to look at, let's look at achievement and economic disadvantage, okay? And for the purposes of this, I'm going to put my middle school on here. And let's just, anybody have a problem if I put Knox County schools on here? It's all public record anyway. All right, let's see what this looks like. So what this is a scatter plot. 7th grade math, and this is their TVAAS scores. Or I'm sorry, this is their achievement scores. So here you have your NCEs. This is your percentage of economic disadvantaged students. These are your free and reduced lunch kids, right? Can you see a trend here? Look at your trend. The higher your scores, let's say it this way, the more free and reduced lunch kids that you have, the lower your scores. The fewer free and reduced lunch kids you have, the higher your scores. Would you agree with that? This is just the data, that's what it says. This is just achievement. Right? So this is where they scored. And so you can make a basic generalization. The fewer free and reduced lunch kids you have, the higher your scores are going to be. Is that fair to say? And we're just looking at real data. Okay, and let's identify some of these. Who would this be? Farragut Middle School. That makes sense? Who's this? West Valley Middle School. Makes sense? If you're from around here, makes sense. Let's look on this end. Fine. Okay? Whittle Springs, Northwest, South Doyle, Carter. Okay, there's my school, and so on. So that's achievement with economically disadvantaged. Okay? Now let's look at the same schools when you compare them to growth. Remember those schools? So we'll go up here, economically disadvantaged. We're going to look at growth now. What happened to your trend? All right. Who is our top performing school? And let me just tell you what this is, remember? This is your zero growth line. What does zero mean? 1 year's worth of growth. These are your growth scores.
By the
Okay?
way, that's what I meant a while ago when you experienced 1 year of growth.
Sure. Yeah, that's exactly right. That's what you're supposed to be at.
Exactly. But when everything is based on, those being a 4 or 5, then that growth,
Harder to move them north.
that was my point.
All right. So here we go. This is your growth index. That's your year's growth. So all these schools are schools as a composite for 7th grade math grew more than expected. All these schools grew less than expected, economically disadvantaged. So your trend is gone, isn't it? So you can look at, remember our highest flying school, Farragut? Let's find Farragut. What does that tell you about Farragut? Just a generalization. What does it mean? That means they've got really good achievement, but low growth. Yeah. Yeah. Maybe.
Yeah, well, we don't know that it's
Sure, economically disadvantaged kids.
it's the,
All right. That's the argument you're saying. That's what he's saying. Yeah. So if you just say you got your really high kids and you grow them 1 year, Dr. Davidson, they'd be right there. So this group of students, and once again, we're just looking at 7th grade math. This group of students didn't get a year's worth of growth, no matter how good they were.
This is just your fun fact for the day. Listen, what Georgia's done is take Tennessee's model, and this is the changes that they made. And just, instead of just looking at a group of kids or a group of 7th graders, they take the kids that scored the same score, like if they scored on the state test 700, they track the growth of kids who scored 700 every year to see their expected growth. So they have an expected growth for every test score. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So I thought, seeing
Right.
what Tennessee's done, they've taken this model and they've tweaked it a little bit. So they're trying to see, so a teacher's effectiveness score will be based on, it'll be different for every student in the class depending on where they score.
Interesting. Who was our low-performing child here, remember? What was the name? Mine. Who's there? I think you're right.
I agree.
Amen. You're right. Yeah, you're right.
I had a teacher that said, give me all the at-risk students.
Yeah.
Just make it a homogeneous class and I'll do well. And they did.
You've got to consider the amount of resources they have to find.
Oh, absolutely.
If you go to Austin Keys, they may have 80 kids in the room, and they've got coaches and Knox County really put the resources. Am I right, Steve?
Absolutely. And David, what it boils down to is it's just like that first little graphic that I showed you about the stars and where they started out. You know, if we were to say we want to evaluate knocks middle on achievement, we'd give them all A's because remember they were up here. Well, we want to grade them on growth. Look where they are. If you wanted to grade Vine on achievement, you'd give them an F. You want to grade Vine on growth, they're not doing too bad. They've taken those low social economic kids and they've grown them. Now, achievement-wise, they're not anywhere close to everybody else. Yeah. We can show them this videotape.
But, I mean, this doesn't, I mean, Vine and this was the last school I was with, I mean, we were in a very similar, we can show growth, but we still have so many of
For
our
achievement.
students who were low achieving.
Basic and below basic. You're right.
But that,
Measuring two different things there, aren't you?
the qualitative difference goes back in the assessment. With the testing world, they say high test achievement, but the predictor is your economics. So you're almost
But Dr. Brewer
test.
had a great point in the fact that you have teachers that say, I want high growth scores. Give me all your basic kids. Because if I have basic kids, I'll teach them up and they will be, we'll get a 3 or 4.
And they do.
Yeah, they do.
You can't do that in the real world. You
Right.
can't give everybody a homogeneous.
No.
So it just doesn't happen. Going back to your point about high scale scores, we had high scale scores, so reasonably high. Our achievement was out the roof. Our value added, obviously, was lower. So what we did was, I talked to Dr. Sanders about it, and I talked to the State Department about it, and they just said it was impossible. We know that there wasn't a ceiling to it, that you still had some growth there. What we did is we went out to each school, we had a presentation, we had our teacher well versed on, so when they had the parent-teacher conference, they could talk about two ways with their child, about their child. They say, your high achievement score is outstanding. Now, growth score, we just sort of left it over here. You know, we still got some work to do to get them up here. They're on grade level, but we want to advance them. Now, that plays well. You play well in the youth.
Right.
But everybody has to have an understanding of it, or it's just going to be mass confusion, and unfortunately, that's what's across the state.
Exactly. Yeah. Once again, I don't think the normal parent understands the difference between achievement and growth. They just don't. They just don't.
What they do understand, if you can show them how their child excelled in one of those categories, they'll be happy.
Keith, you know what they understand? A, B, C, D, and F. That's what parents understand. All right, gang, I enjoyed it. Thank you.